There was hate, endless hatred, and everything was because of Yi Futian. But also, there was a sense of strong regret. If he was not so self-righteous at first in the Penglai deity lake and did not provoke Yi Futian, or no longer pursued that matter afterward, then all this would not have happened. Seeing the situation in front of him, he was clear that he brought his whole family into a storm that could have destroyed his whole family. Moreover, they were already destined to be unable to escape from the situation. They could only continue moving forward. In the cultivation world, when one was vulnerable, no one will forgive them for their mistakes and show mercy. They would only cut the weeds and dig up the roots to eliminate future problems. Kill him. Jun Xiaoyao, who was in battle, roared. Although he was being held back, he could still see Yi Futian's side of the battle. It was enough to just split out on a wisp of consciousness. Seeing Yi Futian's strength, not only did he not want to retreat, he developed a greater determination. Yi Futian must be killed to allow the Eastern Deity Island to exit this battle. If not, the Eastern Deity Island would go to war at any cost for this genius. Even as a level 9, after witnessing Yi Futian's battle with his own eyes, Jun Xiaoyao had to admit that this was probably the most outstanding lower Renhuang he had ever seen, bar none. Must you block me? He looked at the old man in front of him. The matrix covered the sky and held him in this space. There was no way for him to kill Yi Futian, so he could only order other strong people to do so. Jun Xiaoyao, this time, you went the wrong way, the old man responded. It was true that the Jun family was the top faction of the Penglai continent, but they still should not choose to start a war outside the Eastern Deity Island. Although he could understand the attitude of the Jun family, after all, in the Eastern Deity Island, many strong cultivators of the Jun family were killed. Jun Qiuyan, the son of Jun Xiaoyao, was crippled, so the other side felt that it was imperative to kill Yi Futian. But the timing was not right. Jun Xiaoyao should not have come so directly. Unless he expected that the Eastern Deity Island would not fight, his presence would be forcing the Eastern Deity Island's hand. That way, he would make it so that they themselves had no path of retreat. Now, the Eastern Deity Island had chosen to go to war. The Jun family could not retreat even if they wanted to. What is right or wrong? Jun Xiaoyao said in a loud voice. His voice shook the void, and his power of the great path of attack descended. Countless sacred halls descended from the firmament, trying to suppress and shatter the space. Strong cultivators of the Jun family were killed in the Eastern Deity Island. Could the Jun family choose to avoid and not fight because of the Eastern Deity Island? Even if the two sides clashed, within the rules of the Eastern Deity Island, slaughter was slaughter. They naturally wanted revenge. The cultivation world was built like this. There was no right or wrong, only a difference in perspectives. Because of one's thought, the situation in the Penglai continent is going to change. Why suffer? The old man responded. The huge boundless spell matrix erupted with a beam of light that shot towards the heavens, colliding with the descending palace. On the other side, the battle between Shangguan Hong and Yun Mu was also extremely intense. Both of them were level 9s. The sky and the earth broke apart when they fought. Meanwhile, cultivators from the Shangguan clan and Yun clan clashed and fought violently. The boundless heaven and earth on the periphery of the Eastern Deity Island turned into a terrifying battlefield. After the order of Jun Xiaoyao, more strong cultivators went in the direction of Yi Futian, swarming to kill Yi Futian. Some of them attacked with their Dao abilities through the air, but there were many strong cultivators around to help Yi Futian intercept. There was no lack of mighty cultivators from the Eastern Deity Island. After all, this was their home turf. Bai Mu looked at the battlefield, thinking of her master's order. A cold light flashed in her eyes, and she opened her mouth. Today, the Jun family and the Yun clan want to kill the esteemed guest of our Eastern Deity Island, breaking the rules of the Eastern Deity Island. Now that the war has started, you all don't need to care about sentiment anymore. Kill all who resist. Out of all the invited Renhuangs, many were not putting in all their effort and hiding their strength. They all held back somewhat. After all, they did not know how this matter would end up, and without the protection of the Eastern Deity Island, if the Jun family wanted to deal with them in the future, it would be a huge hidden danger. However, Bai Mu's words seemed to have made it very clear. In the future, the Jun family would probably cease to exist. When they thought of this, they also made a decision, and the great will might on their bodies became even more terrifying. They no longer held back and began to kill with abandon. In one direction, several Renhuangs were heading towards Yi Futian's direction to kill him, but they were blocked by a line of people who released flames of the way at the same time. In an instant, the void of heaven and earth turned into a field of flame, burning mountains and cooking the sea. The horrifying divine beams of flame shot towards the heavens as their opponents seemed to have been directly buried in the sea of flame. Those strong cultivators also released strong power of the Great Way, but different flames of the way were distributed in different directions, turning into multiple flames of the way. Those strong cultivators made their seals at the same time, and then a furnace tripod of the Great Way appeared in that space filled with flames of the way, and the flames of the way refined all existence. In another direction, the same group of strong people who went towards Yi Futian was stopped. A group of goddesses of the eastern deity island faced them. They released similar auras, and strong and extreme life force was released from their bodies. Several queens released ancient trees of the Great Way. Those were their divine wheels. They rolled towards the crowd, instantly flooding the space. I'm afraid the Jun family won't be able to kill him. The bystanders would always be the most clear-minded. The strong cultivators of various continents were all watching the battle in the distance and could see the entire battle situation clearly. The eastern deity island's side was at ease as this was their home turf after all. From an onlooker's point of view, the eastern deity island had the absolute initiative. They could almost be considered to have been firmly in control of the battle. If they did not allow a group of people to go towards Yi Futian previously, those strong cultivators might not have been able to reach him anyway. From the current situation, one could see that after Yi Futian killed that group of strong cultivators, he stood alone in the center of the battlefield. Except for some ripples of wind from Dao abilities that rolled towards him, no Renhuangs or attack could come to his side. They were all cut off. This created a rather strange situation. Yi Futian stood there, and no one could fight. Standing in the center of the battlefield, he seemed to have nothing to do. Yi Futian himself was also depressed. The eastern deity island arranged properly and defended his side so well it was impenetrable. But this made him idle in the middle of the storm. He had nothing to do as he watched the battle play out around him. Behind him, Beigong Ao and Emperor Helion were here as well. They were protecting him to his left and right. But in reality, they knew that with Yi Futian's abilities, he no longer needed their protection. Beigong Ao could possibly still be stronger than him, but Emperor Helion was definitely no match for Yi Futian. The previous battle could already show this clearly. Yi Futian's gaze swept to one of the battlefields, then his body moved. Although the eastern deity island was protecting him, he could not stand here to watch the battle. With his strength today, not many people from the opposing side could directly threaten his life. As long as the strongest people were held back, there was no threat to him. His body turned into a ray of light. In one direction, the mighty cultivators of both sides were clashing when they suddenly felt a powerful sword will descend. The expressions of the strong fighters of the Jun family all changed. When they turned their heads, they saw a blade of light flash past. After that, blood spurted out as multiple people were killed consecutively. However, Yi Futian's body did not stop. That gorgeous blade of light shot through the void. It appeared on another battlefield in an instant. Another splendid divine blade of light descended. Sounds of slashing could be heard continuously as blood splattered in the void. Several more Renhuangs were directly killed as the blade of light was too fast. In the distance, those who watched the battle only saw a divine blade of light weaving through the battlefield, and wherever that light passed, blood would appear, accompanied by the fall of Renhuang realm powerhouses. This made their hearts quite unsettled. The Renhuangs were like ants and were being slaughtered with impunity. In just a few moments, they did not know how many were killed by Yi Futian. If this continued, the Renhuangs of the Jun family would be decimated. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1945. Doomsday for Jun Clan. Chapter 1945. Doomsday for Jun clan. It was similarly difficult for the cultivators of the Yun clan. They were already facing the Shangguan clan, who were at a similar level. The cultivators of Eastern Deity Island would also occasionally ambush them. On top of that, Yi Futian's ability had suddenly skyrocketed. He kept killing Renhuangs from the Jun clan, making their decline apparent. Yun Mu, who was battling Shangguan Hong, had a somewhat sullen expression. Aura of the Great Path pressed down on them from the sky. He had a cold and indifferent look as he glanced at Shangguan Hong across from him. He said, "Shangguan clan is also a force from the Penglai continent. Is your clan planning to watch as Eastern Deity Island rises once again in the Penglai continent? Eastern Deity Island has remained secluded for many years. Their ambitions are most likely grand. Shangguan Hong, are you willing to act as a pawn for them?" Shangguan Hong remained unmoved. His expression was indifferent. Yun Mu was trying to incite him. Both sides already had grudges with each other. Before knowing about Eastern Deity Island's stance, the Yun clan probably already had the idea of joining forces with the Jun clan and finding an opportunity to eradicate the Shangguan clan. Now, Yun Mu's words made it seem as though Eastern Deity Island was their common enemy. Shangguan Hong clearly knew that they were not the enemy of Eastern Deity Island. He also knew the reason why Eastern Deity Island had been so reclusive. Moreover, if Eastern Deity Island truly had the ability to suppress the Penglai continent, who could stand in their way? Even large forces could not do so. Now, Shangguan Hong was merely going with the flow. "Yun Mu, why didn't you say this before?" Shangguan Hong asked. Another furious attack crashed towards the other party, knocking Yun Mu's body back. This caused Yun Mu's gaze to turn extremely sullen. His will swept across the entire battlefield. Yi Futian was still continuing his massacre. An 8th-tier cultivator had fallen. If this continued, the Renhuangs of the Jun clan would gradually be killed off, and the Jun clan would be utterly defeated. At that moment, a heavenly might suddenly descended from the sky above. Golden divine light rained down. Divine palaces appeared in the sky above. Among the divine palaces, an elder stood. He looked down below. His aura was powerful beyond comparison. It was the great elder. The eyes of the cultivators of the Jun clan lit up when they saw who had arrived. Their ancestor had come. Jun Xiaoyao led the Jun clan. He was their current leader. However, the strongest person in the Jun clan was this great elder. After handing the Jun clan's management to Jun Xiaoyao, he no longer concerned himself with the matters of the Jun clan, leaving everything to Jun Xiaoyao. The great elder then went in seclusion to cultivate and train in his way. He was trying to break through to the next plane. Although he had not succeeded for many years, his cultivation was already at the pinnacle of the Renhuang plane. His abilities were terrifying. He was the behind-the-scenes figure of the Jun clan, the most powerful existence among them. During this moment of crisis, they never imagined that the great elder would appear. The cultivators of Eastern Deity Island and the Shangguan clan frowned when they sensed the terrifying aura. The ancestor of the Jun clan had arrived as well? His aura was terrifying. In an instant, the vast space was enveloped in a majestic power of the Great Path. The great elder of the Jun clan roared angrily. A heavenly might of the Great Path seemed to descend upon them, crashing towards the minds of the crowd. Many cultivators felt their blood and chi churn. Their own great paths were being suppressed. All battles on the battlefield came to a halt because of his cry. Shangguan Hong's expression also changed slightly. He had not imagined that this old fellow would come out from his seclusion and that he had not died. On the contrary, his aura was so powerful. This would be somewhat troublesome. Supreme Deity Donglai perished many years ago. The current Penglai continent is already not as it was before. Since Eastern Deity Island is not concerned with outside matters, why have you all come out of your seclusion? The great elder of Jun clan interrogated with a voice that contained the suppressive power of the Great Path. A heavenly might of the Great Path descended from the sky. The cultivators of Eastern Deity Island all frowned when they sensed the aura. They realized that no one here could stand against this great elder. As the great elder said this, he lifted his palm and pressed down on the space below. Instantly, it was as though the sky had collapsed. A gigantic divine palace plunged downwards. Everyone was covered by it. A few powerful cultivators released their own heavenly might of the great path to block the attack. However, their efforts were all suppressed and destroyed. They could not hold back the enemy's attack at all. The Penglai continent indeed is not what it once was before. Even though Supreme Deity Donglai has perished for many years on the Penglai continent, it is not your turn, old fellow, to act presumptuous, a cold, proud voice cried out. The words were barely uttered when an elegant figure emerged from the forces of Eastern Deity Island, appearing like a peerless empress. She took a step forward and immediately traversed the space, appearing before the other party. A sacred phoenix let out a long, loud screech. Illusions of phoenixes appeared all around them. At the same time, an extremely proud phoenix appeared. It spat out divine fire of the great path that melted everything in its path as it charged towards the great elder. Divine palaces circled the great elder, preventing the divine fire of the great path from touching him. However, the enormous sacred phoenix spat fire, and its flames flooded the space, enveloping the divine palace. The divine palace was immediately melted and destroyed. It was the divine fire of Wutong. The crowd looked at the divine fire. It was the divine fire that Supreme Deity Donglai had cultivated. It was very frightening and was a destructive fire that would never extinguish. However, it was also an endless divine fire that nurtured all living things. What you say is not wrong. Since you have gone into seclusion to cultivate, stay there. You have managed to live for so long. Why come seek death now? The woman said as her hair fluttered in the wind. She appeared elegant and domineering. Her voice was authoritative. Under the ever-burning fire, the divine palaces were melted and destroyed little by little, causing the great elder of June clan to frown. This fire was approaching perfection. She was so powerful. The crowd was surprised when they saw this scene. The elder of the June clan might not be able to withstand the might of this fire. This great elder had an astonishing ability, but in the blink of an eye he had been suppressed by someone else. Was she a flawless level Renhuang? Some people thought to themselves. That wasn't right. If she were a flawless level 9th tier Renhuang, she would be too powerful. The great elder of the June clan would not be able to put up a fight and would be immediately killed off. She must have refined the divine fire of the great path for her might to be so terrifying. Rumble. The great elder of the June clan had a cold look in his eyes. He was actually being suppressed by a little girl. He had lived for so long that even Supreme Deity Donglai was the same generation as him. Of course, even though they were members of the same generation, their statuses were different. Yet now, the successor of Supreme Deity Donglai was pushing him around. Countless divine palaces circled them. A brilliant and majestic scene appeared in the sky above. He cried out loudly and raised his hand forward. The divine palaces that surrounded them immediately charged with unparalleled might in the direction of the Eastern Deity Island Lord. Yet, at that moment, the Island Lord coldly snorted. A divine tree suddenly sprouted. It was a divine Wutong. It covered the sky and blocked out the sun. Each leaf contained the power of the divine fire. The entire divine Wutong was covered in flames that frenziedly spread. It blotted out the sky and immediately wrapped around the divine palaces charging down. The divine palaces suppressed everything as they attacked. Yet, they were wrapped up in the branches and leaves of the ancient tree. The might of the divine palaces kept weakening. On top of that, the flames consumed the divine palaces, causing them to melt into nothingness before they managed to descend upon the Island Lord. But the Island Lord's fiery red phoenix robe danced in the wind as her hair fluttered in the breeze. The divine Wutong kept expanding outwards. Countless leaves flew out from the expanding divine tree. They swept towards the opponent's figure, becoming a frightening storm. In an instant, the leaves actually became the fiery red flame feathers of a phoenix. A divine phoenix appeared and immediately enveloped the figure of the great elder of June clan. It spurted out flames that invaded the area where the great elder stood. The silhouette of the great elder flashed, and the divine palaces enveloped his figure. He wanted to charge out of this domain of the Great Path. However, as the phoenix spat out flames, the divine Wutong that covered the sky and blotted out the sun descended upon him. It swept over this space and completely sealed it off, forming an absolute domain of the divine fire of the Great Path. It wasn't going to end well for the great elder of the Jun clan. The cultivators watching this scene thought to themselves, this female island lord had powerful abilities. Her domain of the divine fire of the Great Path encapsulated her opponent. It was enough to kill him off. When the cultivators of the Jun clan saw this scene, they were extremely nervous. Many of them had pale expressions. If the great elder was burnt to death by the flames, what would happen then? Jun clan would be faced with a catastrophe. No one had imagined that Eastern Deity Island would be so dominant. This female island lord, the successor of Supreme Deity Donglai who had never revealed herself in public, was actually so powerful. The domain of the divine fire of the Great Path seemed to become ethereal. Within the domain, the great elder of the Jun clan was struggling. He wanted to charge his way out, but the divine wheel of the Great Path transformed from the divine Wutong covered the sky and formed an absolute domain. If he could not withstand the might of the fire, there was only one possible outcome: death. It seems I have indeed grown old. My Jun clan will surrender and leave. If we encounter the cultivators of Eastern Deity Island in the future, we will let you have the right of way, a voice called out from within the domain. The once domineering great elder of the Jun clan had begun to show signs of weakness in the blink of an eye. This voice caused the members of the Jun clan to feel their hearts turn cold. They seemed to understand what was happening. Are you dreaming? The Eastern Deity Island Lord replied indifferently. Her flames became even hotter. What does Island Lord want? The other party cried out, his voice changing slightly. Since you have come here, just stay here, the female Renhuang said in a voice that was still domineering. Not long after, there were miserable cries of agony. The other party's voice became even more anxious as he said, in the future, Jun clan is willing to follow the lead of Eastern Deity Island. There is no need. The reply he heard was still delivered with an icy tone. Very quickly, even more cries of agony filled the air. The cultivators of the Jun clan felt their hearts thumping nonstop. They seemed to have already seen their own end. If even the great elder was killed, how would they turn the tables? Among the crowd, Futian also looked towards Eastern Deity Island Lord. What he had witnessed today might still only be a fraction of Eastern Deity Island's ability. In reality, this large-scale battle did not give Eastern Deity Island much trouble. The fate of the Jun clan was already decided. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1946, Curtain Close. Chapter 1946, Curtain Close. Jun Qiuyan felt as though his recent experiences had been somewhat surreal. He was previously the young master of the Jun clan, a top force of the Penglai continent. His status was astounding, and his talents were exceptional. He was also a powerful figure at the Renhuang Plain. In the entire Penglai continent, he could have his say. He had also made ample preparations for this journey to Eastern Deity Island. He had hoped to take this opportunity to come across fateful encounters of the Great Path on Eastern Deity Island to fortify and increase his own abilities. However, he had ended up in such a state. He himself was crippled, and his clan was almost about to face a catastrophe that would eradicate them. The Great Elder was being consumed by flames right now. The Great Elder's miserable screams of agony could be heard. This made his face turn as pale as ash. Was Jun clan's eradication all because he got them involved? Why was this happening? How could a lower-level Renhuang, whose cultivation was below Jun Qiuyan's own, affect Jun clan's survival, a top force in the Penglai continent? Rumble. In the sky above, divine fire consumed everything. Countless leaves of the Wutong danced in the sky. When the leaves fluttered down to the ground, there was nothing left inside. The great elder of the Jun clan had completely disappeared. Only the beautiful island lord of Eastern Deity Island remained standing in the sky. Behind her, there was a gigantic illusion of the sacred phoenix that was one with the sky. Everything had ended. The appearance of the great elder of June clan had not only been unable to turn the tide of the battle, and he instead had drawn out the true ability of the female island lord of Eastern Deity Island. He was killed on the spot. There was no suspense left in this war. Gales blew, and countless leaves of the Wutong danced in the air. Each leaf contained the power of the divine fire of the Great Path as they swept through vast space. In an instant, with her figure as the center, the entire world seemed to become scorching hot, seemingly consumed by the formless power of the divine fire of the Great Path. "Retreat," Jun Xiaoyao ordered. He sensed that the divine fire of the Great Path was everywhere and had already covered this part of the sky. There was nowhere to escape to unless they could restrict their opponent. But this part of the world seemed to be burning in flames. A gigantic shadow of the sacred phoenix appeared and descended from the sky. It consumed this part of the sky. The expressions of many Renwangs of the Jun clan changed drastically. They discovered that the power of the flames surrounded them. The Renwangs of the Jun clan rose into the sky at the same time as they attempted to retreat. However, right now, it was already too late. In the sky above, Eastern Deity Island Lord was like a peerless goddess. Endless light of the divine fire emanated from her figure. This part of the sky was completely on fire. Endless screams of agony could be heard. Here, Eastern Deity Island Lord was an uncontended existence. Even the great elder of Jun clan was immediately burnt to death by the divine fire of the Great Path. Who else could withstand the power of her Great Path? Many Renwangs were covered in divine flames. They appeared extremely miserable. "Island Lord, have mercy," someone cried out, begging for mercy. Even though they were powerful, when truly faced with death, they would still feel terror. "Since you dared to bully my Eastern Deity Island, there is no meaning in begging now," a cold and indifferent voice stated in the sky. She initially did not want to fight and let the members of the Penglai continent know her abilities clearly. She had merely been watching from the shadows. However, the Jun clan had charged over to kill them. Even the great elder of Jun clan had attacked. She had been forced to emerge from the forces of Eastern Deity Island. Jun clan and Yun clan dared to start the fight today. They must truly believe that her Eastern Deity Island was a pushover. Since that was the case, she had no qualms about killing them. On the battlefield, Renwangs let out cries of agony. Their bodies were burnt to dust in the divine fire of the Great Path, scattering to the winds. In a battle between cultivators at the peak, if the difference between abilities was sufficiently large, there was no possibility of escape. The weaker of the two could only await death. "Island Lord, this matter is unrelated to our Yun clan. Since we were friends with the Jun clan, they invited us here. We had no intention of going against Eastern Deity Island. We hope Island Lord can forgive this trespass." Yun Mu also began to waver when he saw the Renwangs perishing one after another. It was not just the Renwangs of the Jun clan being slaughtered, their Yun clan Renwangs were being killed off as well. If this continued, they would be completely wiped up and would all perish here. "Since you have come here, stay," Eastern Deity Island Lord said indifferently. The divine fire of the Great Path continued to burn. Renwangs continued to perish. At the same time, the cultivators of Eastern Deity Island also attacked. Thus, a one-sided massacre began. Eastern Deity Island Lord controlled the entire field. The situation was completely lopsided. "She's gone mad." In the distance, many members of the continent felt their hearts tremble as they witnessed this scene. Not long ago, they had sought after fateful encounters of the Great Path on Eastern Deity Island. However, this time Eastern Deity Island had become cruel and merciless as they began their massacre. There were Renwangs perishing at every moment. For the cultivators who came from various continents, this was the first time most of them were witnessing such a horrifying scene. Renwangs were being slaughtered in large droves like ants. Such a scene could only be encountered on the battlefield between Renwangs. Today they had witnessed such a scene. On the battlefield, the number of Renwangs was diminishing. The cultivators of the Jun clan as well as the Yun clan were being killed off. As for Eastern Deity Island and Shangguan clan, they had almost no losses. Under such circumstances, it was a complete landslide massacre. Jun clan and Yun clan were finished. Many local cultivators of the Penglai continent lamented. Fate was a cruel mistress. The two overlord clans who dominated the Penglai continent had fallen just like that. They seemed to have forgotten who was the previous overlord of the Penglai continent. Shangguan clan had chosen the right side this time. They would probably have the chance to rise and become even stronger. They would also form ties with Eastern Deity Island. From the looks of it now, anyone could tell that Eastern Deity Island, which had not involved themselves with outside affairs for many years, was still the most powerful force in the Penglai continent. The young city lord of Wushang city of the Penglai continent was also among the crowd. There were also cultivators from Wushang city with him. They watched this scene emotionally. Two giant figures had perished just like that and became history. Who knew how the situation in the Penglai continent would be like in the future? Would Eastern Deity Island directly interfere with the matters of the Penglai continent and re-enter the sights of the world? As the battle continued, the number of cultivators of the two top forces grew fewer and fewer. Jun Xiaoyao and Yun Mu had been surrounded. Eastern Deity Island Lord also attacked from the sky above when she saw the two of them struggling. Very quickly, the two of them were injured and backed into a corner. Must it end like this? Jun Xiaoyao asked as he looked at the female Renhuang in the sky. Cultivating was not easy. It was even more difficult to cultivate to his current level of cultivation. Yet, everything was about to be for naught. Kill them, Eastern Deity Island Lord uttered these two words. She did not respond to Jun Xiaoyao. They had already reached this point. She naturally was not going to show mercy. A sacred phoenix descended upon them, attacking together with the elder. Very soon, Jun Xiaoyao could not withstand the attack anymore and was burnt by the divine fire. Only Jun Chuyen remained alive among the two top forces of the Penglai continent when the battle ended. The cultivators who came to join the battle had all been killed. Eastern Deity Island had not shown any mercy. When Jun Chuyen saw the scene before him, he closed his eyes in pain. He then said, "Kill me then." Right now, he was dead inside. He no longer had any desire to live. What meaning was there in living? Now, even his clan had been eradicated. Yi Futian walked up to Jun Chuyen. Yi Futian did not take much pleasure in this ordeal. Before this, he had released Jun Chuyen. Yi Futian had not been hypocritical. He truly did not want to be involved with the Jun clan anymore and wanted to resolve the matter. Both sides could have just let go of the issue and not pursue it anymore. However, Yi Futian did not know what had happened on Eastern Deity Island for the Jun clan to clearly not agree to this. Hence, they had ended up where they were now. As Jun Chuyen looked at the silhouette in front of him, he asked, "I want to ask you something. Why did Eastern Deity Island fight for you? Was it just because Yi Futian had extraordinary talent?" Jun Chuyen still could not understand. Why did Eastern Deity Island, which had not been involved in outside affairs for many years, fight for Yi Futian and re-enter the sights of the world? Yi Futian pointed a finger at Jun Chuyen. Sword will immediately pierced forwards. With a dull groan, blood spurted out from Jun Chuyen's glabella. His eyes grew dim and he died. Jun Chuyen's eyes were wide open. He did not die in peace. Yet he was unworthy of the answer he wanted to hear. It was over. Such a storm had ended in such a cruel fashion. The cleanup was up next. "Many thanks, Island Lord." Yi Futian thanked the Island Lord as he lifted his head to look at her. No matter how he put it, he had relied on the other party this time. Otherwise, how could Yi Futian possibly deal with a ninth-tier existence? Him taking advantage of her forces this time was considered perfect. Of course, the other party had willingly cooperated. He was naturally aware of this point. Eastern Deity Island Lord was also secretly hinting this to him. It is not over yet. Shangguan Hong, I will bring a few members to the Yun clan. Meanwhile, you bring some of your people to pay Jun clan a visit, the Island Lord instructed as she looked at Shangguan Hong. Next, they still had to tie up loose ends and eradicate any unknown risks. Understood, Sheng Guanhong replied as he nodded his head. Are we leaving immediately? Let's go now, Eastern Deity Island Lord answered. She swept a glance below and ordered, Let's go. As she said this, a group of people traversed across the sky with her, heading to settle things with the Yun clan. Let us also go, Sheng Guanhong ordered. He led his group and left, heading towards the Jun clan. Those who saw this scene understood that these two major forces would completely be eradicated. Very soon, many cultivators left the place. Yi Futian quietly watched as everything happened. It was as though he was keeping out of things. It seemed as though all that had happened were unrelated to him. Even the attacks before this had not involved him. Eastern Deity Island had arranged everything. Or rather, the island lord had arranged all this. Some alchemy masters approached Yi Futian. They had long known about some of the abilities of Eastern Deity Island. They naturally looked down on the Jun clan and Yun clan. The two clans were just a mob, and they actually thought highly of themselves and dared to challenge Eastern Deity Island. It was suicidal for them to have done so. Now, everything had turned out just nice. Their dreams had burst like a bubble, and they had lost their lives. These matters are really uninteresting. Little friend Yi, let us head back and research how to refine pills, someone said. Yi Futian turned his head. He was speechless. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1947, Handover. Chapter 1947, Handover. The issue had come to a close. The storm that started because of an exchange finally ended with the elimination of two top forces of the Penglai continent. Many people lamented the end of these two clans. As expected, they had to remember this lesson and not be too full of themselves. Even until his death, Jun Chuyan most likely had never imagined that him acting condescending towards a lower-level Renhuang would actually result in such an end for himself. It was so embarrassing. The cultivators from various continents still did not leave. A senior figure from the Shengguan clan came to Yi Futian with Shengguan Qiuye following behind him. He smiled and said, I am Shengguan Yun, Qiuye's uncle. I have heard that little friend Ye's talents are peerless and that you are handsome and charming. Now that I have met you today, you are even more outstanding than I imagined. This Shengguan Yun had a cultivation at the 8th tier. He was indeed impressed with Yi Futian's performance. The new generation replaced the old one. In the battle, Yi Futian had yet to display his full abilities. Eastern Deity Island had helped him settle the issue. No one knew what level of combat ability this lower-level Renhuang truly had. Senior, you speak too highly of me, Yi Futian responded with a smile. Miss Shengguan also stands head and shoulders above others. Far from it, the middle-aged man answered with a smile. When we were talking about you before, this little girl Qiuye admired you very much. She kept praising you in front of my elder brother, non-stop. My elder brother also wishes for her to learn more from little friend Yi in the future. My cultivation is still low. What could she possibly learn from me? Yi Futian replied. With such combat prowess, your level of cultivation does not matter. When you become an upper-level Renhuang, who could contend with you at the Renhuang Plain? Shengguan Yun exclaimed. Qiuye's father has headed over to Jun clan. When this whole incident is over, little friend Yi must come over to Shengguan clan and be our guest. If the opportunity arises, I certainly will, Yi Futian replied with a nod. Shengguan Qiuye pouted her mouth as she heard the two of them exchange pleasantries. She had come to understand what sort of fellow this Yi Futian was while she was on Eastern Deity Island. One should never be fooled by his looks. This person was decisive. When he acted cruelly, he struck fear in people's hearts. Had Yi Futian not arranged the end of Jun clan every step of the way? This fellow might have already planned everything when he entered Eastern Deity Island. He might have planned to rely on Eastern Deity Island to eliminate the Jun clan. Of course, ordinary people couldn't persuade Eastern Deity Island to aid them. He had such qualifications, and Eastern Deity Island was willing to attack the Jun clan for him. Renhuang Ye's abilities are indeed unmatched, another person said as they walked over. It was the young city lord of Wushang City, Lu Qing. Before this, on the chessboard, they were brutally pushed around. Now that he had witnessed Yi Futian's true combat ability, he was convinced. This fellow was truly terrifying. Yi Futian nodded at Lu Qing and replied, "You are no slouch yourself." Far from it. Previously, I believed that the chess match held me back. Now I understand that if it weren't for the chessboard, I would have lost even more miserably. I would not even be qualified to have an exchange with you, Lu Qing said with a bitter smile. Before this, a group of Jun clan 7th-tier cultivators had joined forces. They had all been instantly killed by Yi Futian. Lu Qing still knew his own strength. Yi Futian smiled but did not respond. When the difference between abilities was slight, one might feel dissatisfied. However, when the difference was insurmountable, people of the same generation as Yi Futian could only admire and be impressed by him. It was because they would not be able to surpass Yi Futian. If the opportunity arises, I hope I can ask Renhuang Yi for a few pointers, said the young city lord of Wushang City, Lu Qing. Yi Futian nodded his head slightly and said, "Sure." Lu Qing saluted with his fists and said, "May we meet again." "May we meet again," Yi Futian replied with a nod. Lu Qing then turned to leave. The cultivators of Wushang City also left in a flash. They also needed to return. After this event, the situation in the Penglai continent would change. It was just that no one knew Eastern Deity Island's stance. If Eastern Deity Island wanted to dominate the Penglai continent, no other force would be able to stand against it. Not long after, news arrived from the Jun clan and Yun clan. "Let's head back," Yi Futian said as he turned to leave. He actually headed back in the direction of Eastern Deity Island. With the close of this incident, the hidden dangers of the outside world had been resolved and would no longer threaten the Dongyuan Pavilion. Beigong Ao and Emperor Helian followed Yi Futian. Many alchemy masters also joined him. Their eyes were exceptionally bright when they looked at Yi Futian. This fellow was a treasure. They needed to properly develop him and teach him to concoct pills, though many of them would not necessarily be able to refine pills of a higher grade than Yi Futian. Nevertheless, Yi Futian still had enormous potential that could be extracted. He needed to be properly guided. When his cultivation increased, his attainments in refining pills would also increase. He would be a walking treasure trove in the future. When they saw Yi Futian's group leave, the cultivators from various continents and the Penglai continent in the distance also dispersed and left. Although this incident had affected the future situation in the Penglai continent, for the other cultivators, it did not affect them much. They would do what they needed to. Yi Futian's ability also moved them greatly. They were inspired to properly cultivate and improve themselves. Yi Futian alone had cultivated so many powers of the Great Path. He had also achieved mastery in all of them. His might was terrifying. The cultivators felt that their own cultivation, which they were proud of, could not hold a candle to Yi Futian's cultivation. The Penglai continent still had many trading places. The other cultivators would see whether they could find a treasure suitable for their cultivation to bring back and train hard for a period of time. As for Yi Futian, he returned once again to Eastern Deity Island. Bai Mu and the others were all beside him. Yi Futian said to Beigong Ao and Emperor Helian, "Seniors, the matters here have been settled. I might not be returning to the Dongyuan Pavilion. Why don't I hand over the Dongyuan Pavilion to the two of you?" "You are not returning?" Beigong Ao exclaimed, stunned. He was still hoping for Yi Futian to act as Dongyuan Pavilion Master. After all, Yi Futian might become a legendary figure in the future. However, after considering Yi Futian's potential, Beigong Ao clearly understood. The Dongyuan Pavilion most likely could not make Yi Futian stay. He did not belong to that continent. How could a nameless continent hold a true dragon like him? Yi Futian replied with a nod. He naturally came to the Divine Prefecture to train in order to steadily increase his abilities and constantly aim for even higher levels of attainment. The Dongyuan Pavilion was just a stepping stone. Now, the Eastern Deity Island was more suitable for his next stage of cultivating. "Beigong's cultivation is higher than mine," Emperor Helian said. "If Pavilion Master is not planning to return, Dongyuan Pavilion should be handed over to Beigong." There is no one more powerful than he is on the continent now. Yi Futian nodded and said, Senior Beigong is indeed more suitable to be Dongyuan Pavilion Master. Senior Helian can stay for a while on Eastern Deity Island and cultivate here. All right, Emperor Helian answered. He understood that Yi Futian wanted to help him. Eastern Deity Island contained many fateful encounters as well as materials and treasures. Asking him to stay and cultivate for a period of time naturally was Yi Futian hoping to provide benefits for his cultivation. Beigong Ao revealed a look of deep thought. He seemed to have an idea. After a moment of silence, he said, Pavilion Master. Yi Futian asked as he looked at Beigong Ao. Previously, I had always wished to control the Dongyuan Pavilion. Yet now, I seem to have lost interest in the position of Dongyuan Pavilion Master. This time, after returning to the continent and the Dongyuan Pavilion, I plan to follow Pavilion Master to cultivate once I have settled matters back home. What do you think? Beigong Ao said. He believed that following Yi Futian was even more precious than the position of Dongyuan Pavilion Master. Emperor Helian was stunned. His footsteps slowed down. Beigong Ao was already at the 8th tier now. He was the continent's top cultivator. It was natural for him to control the Dongyuan Pavilion. He was the top figure of the continent. What an honor that was. Emperor Helian was envious of Beigong Ao. Yet the other party had changed his mind and gave up all this. Beigong Ao was willing to follow Yi Futian and cultivate by his side. He was aware that by following Yi Futian he was destined to be unknown. Many cultivators would certainly gather around Yi Futian. Yi Futian's own splendor was enough to outshine everyone around him. Forsaking the status of the top figure of the continent and following Yi Futian to cultivate was a bold move. Emperor Helian knew that Beigong Ao was a shrewd fellow. From the looks of it, he gave up being the top figure of the continent and the position of Dongyuan Pavilion Master in order to have the chance of witnessing the view from even higher places. Beigong Ao's ambitions were very grand. Emperor Helian felt that he himself was inferior to Beigong Ao. Yi Futian was also somewhat surprised at this. He looked at Beigong Ao. Although Yi Futian could faintly understand the stance of Eastern Deity Island now, Beigong Ao had followed him from the Dongyuan Pavilion and was more trustworthy. Having an 8th-tier cultivator beside him would make life much easier for him. In addition to Zifeng, Yi Futian would not need to attend to ordinary situations. Are you serious? Yi Futian asked. An 8th-tier cultivator was already a figure at the peak. Beigong Ao would be the top cultivator on the continent when he returned. I am serious. I have considered this before, Beigong Ao replied. He smiled, seemingly very calm. All right, Yi Futian answered, nodding his head. It is just that there will be inconveniences for you, Senior. There won't be any inconveniences. I will return to settle matters in the Dongyuan Pavilion as well as the matters of Yang clan, Beigong Ao said. Yang Dongqing had betrayed Yi Futian on Eastern Deity Island, conspiring with Jun Chuyan, and was killed. The issue with the Yang clan naturally needed to be settled to prevent hidden dangers in the future. Yi Futian nodded. You should head back to make arrangements first. Senior Helian will cultivate here for a period of time. When the time comes for the handover, Senior Helian shall inherit the position of Dongyuan Pavilion Master until you return. That won't be a problem, Beigong Ao said as he nodded his head. He looked at Beigong Shuang and instructed, You stay here and cultivate with Pavilion Master Yi. Beigong Shuang agreed, nodding her head. Emperor Helian, who was to the side, glanced at him. This old fox had not forgotten to arrange for his daughter to stay by Yi Futian's side. This scheming fellow. If Yi Futian did not have a partner already, this fellow would most likely want his daughter to pounce on Yi Futian directly. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Many people speculated that Eastern Deity Island would bestow Goddess by Mu to Yi Futian to become his path companion to make him stay and cultivate on Eastern Deity Island. They were all wondering, what was Yi Futian doing on Eastern Deity Island now? He should be enjoying various pills and working hard to improve his own cultivation. He might also be enjoying his time with the ladies. With such talents, Eastern Deity Island would certainly go all out to persuade him to stay. Right now, on Eastern Deity Island, in an alchemy area, Yi Futian's face was covered in dirt and grim. His face was black as though he had been burnt. His white robes had been stained black, and he was covered in weird smells. Where was his usual charm and temperament? He looked completely different from what the people outside imagined him to be. If they saw what Yi Futian looked like now, what would they think? Senior Hellion, although this pill came out a bit ugly, please don't mind and don't waste it, Yi Futian said as he held up the pill he had just refined. Although the aura of the whey emanated from the pill, it was hideous and had no sense of form or shape. It appeared very unappetizing. Emperor Hellion grimaced as he weakly replied, "Pavilion Master, I have already consumed many pills. I need time to digest them properly. We can save this pill for Beigong Ao. He has yet to savor Pavilion Master's pills." These past few days, Yi Futian had asked Emperor Hellion to stay on Eastern Deity Island to cultivate. Emperor Hellion had thought that he would be consuming elixirs and miraculous medicines all day long. Yet, in reality, Yi Futian fed Emperor Hellion his own refined elixirs every day. The color, smells, and tastes of these elixirs did not need to be mentioned. The pills Yi Futian refined were also varied. There were many grades, and some were even failures. Saying that they should not put the pills to waste, Yi Futian had fed them all to Emperor Hellion. The dignified head of the Hellion royal family had pitifully become a lab rat for Yi Futian to test his pills on. It was too miserable. Then, Hellion Yu, come and try it, Yi Futian ordered. I think these elixirs are best to be used on father. My cultivation is not high. These elixirs are way too nutritious for me, Hellion Yu rejected softly. Yi Futian looked at Beigong Shuang, who was at the side. The latter looked back at him with an innocent gaze as she gently shook her head. It seems like everyone upholds the virtue of sharing, Yi Futian lamented. He glanced at Black Wind Condor, who was standing near him. When Little Condor sensed Yi Futian's thought, he turned around and left. He knew nothing. Senior Hellion, you have reached the bottleneck in terms of your cultivation. Yi Futian convinced Emperor Hellion, saying, perhaps some meridians in your body are clogged. You need pills to help you with it. You don't have to be modest and decline it. His eyes revealed a glint of joy. Emperor Hellion was no longer young, and his cultivation had been stuck on the same plane for a long time. Actually, even though most of the pills that Yi Futian fed Emperor Hellion were low-level pills, many pills were prescriptive and compatible with Emperor Hellien's life attributes. These pills would not directly affect the consumer, but they could strengthen the consumer's vigor. Vitality was the root of a person's cultivation. When a cultivator had exuberant vitality and a strong spirit, they would better comprehend the things around them. Yi Futian did not directly refine elixirs that Emperor Hellion needed for his training. Instead, he approached it from another angle and strengthened Emperor Hellien's foundation. This method was something Yi Futian learned from the memory of Supreme Deity Donglai. For the past few months, Emperor Hellion had been reaping the pill's benefits while consuming them in pain. Now, he had finally broken through to the next plane. This storm of the Great Path lasted for a long while. When Emperor Hellion was done with his training, he came to meet Yi Futian. A satisfied smile could be seen on Emperor Hellien's face. Congratulations, Yi Futian said with a smile. Many thanks. Emperor Hellion bowed slightly at Yi Futian. He was over the moon to experience a breakthrough. However, as an 8th-tier existence, he was also well aware that his achievement was credited to Yi Futian's hard work. Emperor Hellion had not expected that the torture he had suffered for the past few months would result in his breakthrough. Senior broke through the next plane with your own effort. You don't have to thank me. Senior has endured a lot of hardships for the past few months. Yi Futian continued with a smile. Since Senior has advanced to the next plane, you may return to the continent without any worries. Emperor Hellion felt somewhat emotional too. At this moment, he could vaguely understand the thoughts of Beigong Ao. The idea of letting go of his past and following Yi Futian to train also surfaced in Emperor Hellien's mind. Why don't I also stay? Emperor Helian suggested. Senior Beigong has already said that the Dongyuan Pavilion also needs people. He is still waiting for Senior to return to take over things, Yi Futian interrupted. The future is unpredictable if you follow me. There might even be danger. Senior is in charge of the royal family. It would be best for you to return. Emperor Helian nodded his head slightly. Go then. Now that you have broken through to the next plane, I have no regrets, Yi Futian continued. Only then did Emperor Helian understand that Yi Futian had actually wanted him to break through to the next plane before letting him leave. Emperor Helian saluted Yi Futian with his fists again and said, "May we meet again." "May we meet again," Yi Futian replied as he nodded his head. "Let's go," Emperor Helian said to Helian Yu beside him. Helian Yu looked at Yi Futian, smiled, and said, "I will be in the Dongyuan Pavilion, awaiting the day that your name reaches us." Yi Futian smiled. Helian Yu looked very highly upon his future. Emperor Helian left Eastern Deity Island. After some time, Beigong Ao returned. He had handed his responsibilities to his clansmen and had arranged all his matters. He then came to Eastern Deity Island and began a period of cultivation. It was also the same for Yi Futian. He went into seclusion on Eastern Deity Island. Aside from concocting pills, he trained and cultivated. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1949. Breaking Through to the Next Plane. Chapter 1949. Breaking through to the next plane in the year 10050 of the Divine Prefecture calendar, the Penglai continent had returned to its original calm. It had been several years since the storm of events back then. Now, the Penglai continent's Shangguan clan had risen rapidly. Since the battle back then, the rivals of the Shangguan clan, Jun clan, and Yun clan had been eliminated. On the other hand, the Shangguan clan became more powerful and had even closer ties with Eastern Deity Island. Rumor had it that the Shangguan clan regularly paid a visit to Eastern Deity Island, and they had mutual exchanges. Rumor also has it that Eastern Deity Island supplied the Shangguan clan with many elixirs of the Great Path. After that battle, the Shangguan clan seemed to have won the lottery. Many of their renhuangs broke through to the next plane one after another. They had many more 8th-tier cultivators and were constantly growing even stronger. They had no equals in the Penglai continent. However, some rumors claimed that the Shangguan clan had already allied with Eastern Deity Island and represented Penglai continent. No one knew the exact details, and they had no proof. No one knew what was the exact relationship between Eastern Deity Island and the Shangguan clan either. They only knew that Eastern Deity Island kept an extremely low profile. It was as though they had cut off ties with the outside world. Many people did not understand why Eastern Deity Island was acting this way. They had already proven their might a few years ago. Why did they still need to keep such a low profile and act reserved? Right now, on the calm and peaceful Eastern Deity Island, the father-daughter combo of the Shangguan clan, Shangguan Hong and Shangguan Qiuye, brought many people to visit. They were waiting quietly in the courtyard of a palace. People were keeping them company as their group quietly waited while sipping tea. "How long does little friend Yi still want to cultivate?" Shangguan Hong asked. There were rumors in the outside world that he had close ties with Eastern Deity Island. In reality, it was not so. Although he had visited Eastern Deity Island regularly, he had come to find Yi Futian every time. With Yi Futian's acquaintance with Shangguan Qiuye back then and having cooperated before, the Shangguan clan grew closer with Yi Futian. Naturally, it was easier for them to approach each other. Shangguan Hong was also aware that Yi Futian might have an extraordinary position on Eastern Deity Island. As long as Shangguan Hong maintained a good relationship with Yi Futian, that would be enough. Moreover, these past few years, Shangguan Hong discovered that Yi Futian was actually proficient in concocting pills. His ability to refine pills also improved suddenly by leaps and bounds, becoming more powerful each time he visited. It was a flawless level aura of the Great Path. Someone was breaking through to the next plane on Eastern Deity Island in the palace. Who else could it be? Flawless level, Shengguan Hong mumbled. Before this, Yi Futian's cultivation was already at the peak of the lower-level Renhuang plane when he was a third-tier Renhuang. If he broke through to the next plane now, his cultivation would be at the middle-level Renhuang plane. The divide between the lower-level Renhuang plane and the middle-level Renhuang plane was a pit. Many people had flawless divine wheels of the Great Path when they were at the lower-level Renhuang plane. However, they were unable to continue maintaining their flawless divine wheels at the middle-level Renhuang plane. Would Yi Futian be able to do so then? If Yi Futian still had a flawless divine wheel of the Great Path, his combat ability would be able to threaten a 7th-tier cultivator. In addition to his various other trump cards, his ability would be terrifying. Shengguan Qiuye similarly felt her heart tremble. The difference between her plane and Yi Futian's was not very large. Hence, the impact was greater on her. The aura of the Great Path generated as Yi Futian was breaking through to the next plane made her feel ashamed of herself. Her beautiful eyes stared in that direction. Colorful lights rained down from the sky. The colorful rainbow lights were like heavenly signs. The humming of swords, the sound of gyukins, the thundering of divine elephants stampeding, celestial bodies appearing in the sky, and the illusory image of an ancient tree filled the vast space. These were heavenly signs. Many people gazed in awe. This scene was a wonder to behold. It was beautiful and seemed to make people forget that someone was breaking through to the next plane. The resonating sound of the Great Path could be heard. In the distance, people kept heading over in this direction. Many cultivators on Eastern Deity Island were drawn over. They stepped into the air and gathered outside the palace. They stopped and looked toward the direction of the strange scene. It was a flawless level aura. Many people were astonished. A middle-level Renhuang managed to maintain a flawless divine wheel of the Great Path. Such talent was rare. Bai Mu also appeared. She stood in the air, and her heart was moved. She felt that calling her a goddess seemed like a bit of a misnomer. Compared to Yi Futian, she was far inferior. Incredible, many alchemy masters cried out in astonishment as they walked out. This fellow puts us to shame when it comes to concocting pills. Now, even his cultivation is so flawless. How can old fellows like us go on? Someone said, "Don't flaunt your seniority." Years ago, that fellow killed 7th-tier cultivators like ants. Now, with his breakthrough, even an 8th tier like yourself might be no match for him, someone said beside the person who had spoken. The old fellow was so angry that his nostrils flared, and he glared at the other person. However, he could not say anything. He clearly knew that what the other person had said was true. He had no words to counter him. After breaking through to the middle-level Renhuang plane while maintaining a flawless divine wheel of the Great Path, how powerful would Yi Futian's combat ability be now? 7th-tier cultivators were no longer worth Yi Futian's consideration unless they were also monstrous figures who forged flawless divine wheels of the Great Path. Otherwise, 7th-tier cultivators without flawless divine wheels would only be killed instantly by him. The brilliant light remained as the Great Path resonated. Strange phenomenon shone, and Yi Futian sat cross-legged among them. He was comprehending the Great Path and absorbing the power of the Great Path. He had entered a state of ecstasy. His soul wandered out from his body and sensed everything around him. Rumbling sounds could be heard constantly, coming from his body. It was a baptism of the Great Path that continued to temper his Renhuang figure. At that moment, an overbearing aura descended from the sky. Many people saluted with their fists as they looked over in the direction of the aura. They wanted to call out to the person who had arrived, but the other party extended her hand, signaling them to remain silent. The figure then waved her hand and said, "Don't let this matter be known. Stand down and let him continue cultivating." This voice rang in everyone's eardrums, causing the crowd to be stunned. However, they still nodded their heads and did as they were told. They left the place one by one. No one dared to disturb Yi Futian's cultivation. Eastern Deity Island Lord glanced at Yi Futian. Her figure gradually disappeared, but her will still lingered, watching over everything. The rumbling of the Great Path continued without end, persisting for a few days. The entire Eastern Deity Island was stirred up by this incident, But no one disturbed Yi Futian as he broke through to the next plane. They merely observed everything that occurred quietly, watching over him. It was as though Yi Futian's breakthrough was the most anticipated and most important day for Eastern Deity Island. That day, a majestic aura of the Great Path frenziedly erupted. It surged into Yi Futian's body. Yi Futian sat there. It was as though he was experiencing a mighty baptism of the Great Path. The rumbling from inside his body made it seem as though the sky was about to explode. But an extremely brilliant, colorful light radiated from his figure and swept out across the space. It spread out far into the distance. At that moment, cultivators across the entire Eastern Deity Island saw a resplendent light of the Great Path. They knew that Yi Futian had broken through to the next plane. When they lifted their heads and looked over in that direction, they saw Yi Futian's body floating in the sky above. His temperament was even more outstanding. His dazzling, handsome gaze was full of vigor. After breaking through to the next plane, Yi Futian seemed as divine as a deity. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1950, The Yin-Yang Diagram. Chapter 1950, The Yin-Yang Diagram. After the power of the Great Path entered Yi Futian's body, the strange signs disappeared. His white robe fluttered in the wind. His long, silver hair was extremely elegant. Down below, many people looked towards him. Xia Qingyun, Little Condor, Zi Feng, Beigong Ao, and the others smiled as they looked at the brilliant divine halo. Yi Futian had proven his way and become a middle-level Renhuang. His divine wheel of the Great Path became even more dazzling. It was still flawless. Yi Futian's ability had gone up a level. If others did not know and only looked at his cultivation plane, they would most likely be deceived. Who would have thought that a fourth-tier middle-level Renhuang would actually already possess the combat ability of an ordinary eighth-tier Renhuang? Yi Futian's figure descended. When Beigong Ao saw Yi Futian descend, he walked up to welcome Yi Futian. Beigong Ao smiled and said, "After breaking through to the next plane, even I might no longer be a match for you, right?" "You are too modest," Yi Futian said with a smile. "These past few years, Uncle Beigong hasn't been sitting idly either. The cloud wood has completely merged into your body. Your body has become a body of thunder. Your combat ability is powerful." Now, the relationship between the two of them was even closer. Beigong Ao had decided to follow Yi Futian to cultivate. Yi Futian also did not call him senior anymore. Yi Futian directly referred to him as an uncle. Beigong Ao also enjoyed being called so very much. When Beigong Ao heard Yi Futian's modest speech, he smiled. After knowing Yi Futian for so long, Beigong Ao knew what Yi Futian was. How could Yi Futian's words be believed? This was especially so in terms of Yi Futian's cultivation. He claimed that his talent in concocting pills was average, and his cultivation ability was normal. As for what level Yi Futian's combat ability was at, only Yi Futian himself knew. Whoever believed his words would be fooled. Of course, Beigong Ao naturally hoped that Yi Futian would become stronger. After all, Yi Futian was the person who Beigong Ao had decided to follow. Yi Futian's glory was his own glory. Wasn't it because of Yi Futian that he and Emperor Helian managed to break through to the 8th tier? At that moment, the sound of people traversing across the sky could be heard. From afar, they could hear people call out, "Congratulations for breaking through to the next plane, little brother." "Little friend Yi, congratulations," silhouettes greeted as they dashed over. They were cultivators from the Eastern Deity Island's alchemy pavilion chased off by the island lord. Many of them were more elderly fellows. After all, many people who had outstanding talent and potential in cultivation were unwilling to waste their time on concocting pills. Yi Futian stepped forward to welcome them. He said, "Many thanks, elder brothers. I merely broke through one plane. It is but a small matter. It is a small matter if other people break through to the next plane. However, if it is you, that is different." "Ha," an elder said as he laughed out loud. He looked at Yi Futian with a gaze as though he was staring at a treasure. Before this, Yi Futian's ability in concocting pills was already very powerful and was gradually reaching perfection. Now, with his cultivation breakthrough and the fact that his divine wheel of the Great Path was still flawless, that meant that Yi Futian might be able to concoct pills of the Great Path of an even higher grade. Indeed, now that you have broken through to the next plane, even among the peak giant forces of the Donghua domain, you could still stand out. Yet another person chipped in. A middle-level Renhuang who proved his way with a flawless divine wheel had the potential to continue doing so when he reached the upper-level Renhuang plane. If he became an upper-level Renhuang with a flawless divine wheel, the significance was extraordinary. That meant that he had the potential to reach the top of the cultivation world. Everyone understood the meaning that the speaker implied. Even when Supreme Deity Donglai was alive back then, if a figure like Yi Futian had appeared, he would be the cream of the crop and would be brought up as a successor. If such a prominent figure appeared in Shangguan clan, I can rest easy, said Shangguan Hong as he also walked out. He had initially been preparing to leave. Upon seeing that Yi Futian was breaking through to the next plane, he remained here, waiting until Yi Futian succeeded. Senior Shangguan, Yi Futian greeted Shangguan Hong with a smile as he nodded his head. At that moment, a voice instructed, "For now, do not let the news that he has broken through to the next plane get out." The voice was authoritative. It was the voice of Eastern Deity Island Lord. Before this, she had already given them a warning once before. This time, she must have said it for Shangguan Hong to hear, reminding him not to reveal this to the outside world. When Yi Futian heard the words of the other party, he thought to himself that the female island lord of Eastern Deity Island must be truly treating him as one of her own. She intentionally helped him keep his cultivation breakthrough a secret. She probably did not want to reveal too much news about him and draw the attention of the outside world. Understood, many people replied as they nodded their heads. Shangguan Hong also intentionally replied, "After I leave, my lips are sealed on all matters regarding Eastern Deity Island." Shangguan Hong knew his place. He knew that to maintain a good relationship with Eastern Deity Island, he had to first be able to keep secrets. Just a few years ago, the Jun clan and Yun clan were eradicated. Shangguan Hong would not do something to displease Eastern Deity Island. After your cultivation breakthrough, you can use pills to aid your cultivation and fortify your plane, the female island lord continued. She was naturally speaking to Yi Futian. There are still many quality pills in Alchemy Pavilion. Now, your level of attainment in pills is higher than mine. You may choose whatever pill you please, the other party continued. Yi Futian said, "Many thanks, Island Lord." Yi Futian was moved. Yi Futian grinned as he looked at the alchemy masters of Alchemy Pavilion. As expected, he saw the other party's faces darken. The Island Lord was excessively picking favorites. Was she giving Alchemy Pavilion away to Yi Futian? "Masters, I have not concocted pills for a while. Let me see whether I have made any progress," Yi Futian said with a grin. The alchemy masters of Alchemy Pavilion shuddered when they saw his grin. They could only nod their heads begrudgingly. "All right, let's go." Yi Futian headed over to Alchemy Pavilion with the masters happily. After his cultivation breakthrough, he concocted pills for a period of time. A few days later, the fragrance of pills could be picked up coming from Alchemy Pavilion. There were also bursts of colorful lights. Many alchemy masters had gathered over there. Every time a pill was successfully concocted, they were astonished. As expected, after Yi Futian's cultivation breakthrough, his skill level in concocting pills improved once again. The pills he managed to refine were of an even higher grade. Today, the alchemy cauldron was vibrating violently again. A burst of rainbow light shot up into the sky. The sky above the alchemy area was covered in colorful light. It was as though the shadow of a divine tree had appeared. Endless aura of the great path of life circled the area. Green divine halos rained down, enveloping the vast space. On the divine tree, a glittering and transparent pill appeared. It is a fruit of the way of life. It is a flawless level middle-grade elixir, the alchemy masters exclaimed as they narrowed their eyes. They stared at the fruit of the way. Yi Futian could already concoct a pill of this level. This fruit of the way immediately consumed the divine halo of the great path around it. It was full of unparalleled life force. Yi Futian opened his eyes and extended his hand to grab it. The pill took the form of a fruit, and its shape was perfect. His level of concocting pills had already far surpassed what he could manage just a few years ago. Many cultivators stared at the pill. Yi Futian simply passed the fruit over to Xia Qingyuan, who was beside him. He said, "This pill should be useful for your cultivation." Xia Qingyuan gently nodded her head and kept the fruit away as she received it. She indeed also needed to work hard and cultivate to improve her own abilities. Yi Futian's growth was too rapid. Soon she would not be able to keep up with his pace of advancement. Many alchemy masters rolled their eyes at Yi Futian. They could only watch as Xia Qingyuan kept the pill away. This Yi Futian had once again pocketed the goods, leaving all the benefits to those beside him. Yet, the alchemy masters could not do anything. The island lord had acquiesced it. They could only watch and hope that Yi Futian would concoct pills for them. It appears that one's cultivation is indeed beneficial for concocting pills. I have tried my hand at it these past few days. I will concoct more pills in the future if I have the chance. I will now continue cultivating in seclusion for a period of time, Yi Futian said. The crowd stared wide-eyed at him. That was it? What about their pills? Wasn't he going to continue concocting? Before this, he had selected many of their precious pills for his own use. Wasn't he planning to compensate them with a few concoctions? I am somewhat tired. Masters, I will come again when I have the time, Yi Futian said as he ignored their gazes and made himself scarce. These old fellows were all thieves. He had to first grow their appetite. He indeed had to improve his cultivation first. As everyone else was staring wide-eyed at him, Yi Futian left just like that. After he returned to his palace, he began another period of cultivating in seclusion. However, this time, he did not seek to have a breakthrough in terms of planes. Instead, he cultivated law power. Within the memories that he inherited from Supreme Deity Donglai, there were many incredible law powers. Back in the day, Supreme Deity Donglai was an alchemy grandmaster at the pinnacle of the profession. His knowledge on the subject was vast, and he knew many law powers. Some of them he had cultivated himself while others were stored within his memories. After Yi Futian left Alchemy Pavilion, he was no longer seen by Eastern Deity Island members. This fellow actually continued to cultivate in seclusion. It was as though the only thing on his mind was cultivating. In the blink of an eye, another few months passed. On a training platform in Yi Futian's palace, Yi Futian sat cross-legged. Aura of the Great Path emanated from his body. Two different powers of the Great Path circled his figure. One was yang and one was yin. One was hot, one was cold. The two different powers of the Great Path crisscrossed as they circled him, forming a miraculous spiral of the Great Path. At that moment, an extremely dazzling scene appeared in Yi Futian's life palace. In the world of the life palace, a gigantic pattern of a divine artifact appeared in the sky. It seemed to be a pair of yin-yang fish. One was yin, and the other was yang. The two extremes of yin and yang seemed to become the sun and the moon. The power of yang and the power of yin appeared to emanate from them. Yi Futian possessed the power of yin as well as the divine fire of Wudong. Although the divine fire of Wudong was not the true fire of the sun, it was also of the yang attribute and was extremely overbearing. Yi Futian could faintly make out the shadow of the ancient tree from within the pattern. The branches and leaves of the ancient tree spread out and merged with the two powers of the Great Path, causing it to become a complete pattern. What was even more frightening was that at the edges of the pattern, sword will emerged from the power of yin and yang that had been raining down constantly. It was as though the power of yin and yang became shadow swords as well as sun swords. They circled the yin-yang diagram. This scene was astonishing. Its might was terrifying. This art was derived from an extremely powerful way of the Great Path. Now, it was being comprehended by Yi Futian. He wanted to forge it into a new divine wheel of the Great Path, merging this power of the Great Path with his technique. If he succeeded, its power would be extremely terrifying. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Days passed. Yi Futian seemed completely absorbed in cultivating to the point of obsession. Days passed. Yi Futian seemed completely absorbed in cultivating to the point of obsession. Today, on a training platform, the extremely dazzling power of yin and yang appeared above Yi Futian's figure, circling him. His entire body was shining, as though a yin-yang diagram had appeared on his body. His figure resonated intensely with the surrounding power of the Great Path. Rumbling sounds of the Great Path kept coming from inside his body, causing the Great Path around him to resonate with him. A brilliant sun and moon appeared at the same time. Intense currents of the Great Path spiraled around him and gradually became a frightening pattern. The pattern's structure was extremely stable and resonated with Yi Futian's figure. After a long time, they formed a dazzling picture. The sun and moon were in the sky, and the yin-yang fish circled them, completing the entire arrangement. Vibration sounds could be heard from the palace. The gazes of many people turned towards the direction of the training platform where Yi Futian was. What commotion was this fellow causing while cultivating? However, the crowd knew better than to disturb Yi Futian, allowing him to continue cultivating. Beigong Ao was already used to it. No matter what earth-shattering actions Yi Futian did now, Beigong Ao would not be surprised. He had already accepted that the fellow was a monstrous existence. Let alone back in the continent where the Dongyuan Pavilion was, even in the current Penglai continent, there was no one who could be compared to Yi Futian. No one was even qualified to be compared with him. Otherwise, with Beigong Ao's 8th-tier cultivation, he would not willingly follow Yi Futian. The cultivation world always prioritized one's ability above all else. Right then, on the training platform, Yi Futian opened his eyes. His jet-black eyes seemed to contain the light of the sun and the moon. He lifted his head and glanced at the yin-yang diagram in the sky. He had forged another divine wheel of the Great Path. However, he still needed to increase the level of this divine wheel. The power of yin and yang complemented each other. If he supported this power with his swordsmanship, how powerful would it be? Yi Futian thought to himself. The light of divine swords emerged from the edges of the yin-yang diagram. The next moment, his will shifted, and the power of the Great Path in the sky above, as well as the dazzling divine light disappeared, immediately surging into Yi Futian's body. However, he did not leave, instead continuing to cultivate. His cultivation plane was already that of a 4th-tier middle-level Renhuang. This meant that he already had flawless 4th-tier divine wheels of the Great Path. In reality, his divine wheels had all been proven. Now, even if he comprehended a new divine wheel, with the foundation of his plane, it would still be improved very quickly. He extended his hand and opened his palm. He had a handful of pills. Yi Futian threw the pills directly into his mouth and then swallowed them. Instantly, rumbling sounds came from inside his body. The aura of the Great Path was extremely rich. His life force was growing stronger, and his vitality also became more powerful. The pills were too nourishing. However, these were all the pills that he concocted himself. It would be a waste for him not to consume them. The pills that he concocted did not forcefully increase his abilities and did not have any side effects. They only fortified his foundation. Very quickly, his aura became very powerful. He continued cultivating for a period of time. A few days later, the rumbling sounds of the Great Path in Yi Futian's body sounded around the training platform. When the dazzling pattern of the Great Path circled him, the heavens changed color. Only then was Yi Futian satisfied with the result of his training. As he lifted his head and glanced at this new divine wheel of the Great Path, he smiled. The next moment, the light of the Great Path surged into his body and disappeared without a trace. Everything returned to normal. As he stood up, he finally ended his period of seclusion. When Yi Futian emerged, he encountered the phoenix. Zifeng looked at him and asked, "Have you ended your seclusion?" Yi Futian replied with a nod, "I will probably not be cultivating for a very long time in the future." After his cultivation breakthrough, Yi Futian spent a lot of time fortifying his plane. He also forged a new divine wheel of the Great Path. For now, he had reached a certain level where it would not be beneficial to continue cultivating. Hence, he had no reason to continue his seclusion. What about my divine fire? Didn't you say that you would bring it along to aid me in my cultivation? Zifeng asked as she looked at Yi Futian with her beautiful eyes. Ahem. Yi Futian looked at the phoenix and said, Zifeng, the divine fire is already inside of me and has merged with me. If you wish to sense it, you can do so by cultivating by my side. Zifeng stared at Yi Futian quietly and did not say anything. These past few days, aside from concocting pills, Yi Futian had only been in seclusion. Since when did he give her the chance to cultivate by his side? Had this fellow been scheming all along ever since he played the flight of the phoenix pair on Wutong Island? As expected, the words of men could not be trusted. I'll drop by Alchemy Pavilion to pay a visit, Yi Futian said as he prepared to skedaddle. Women were not to be offended. Although she was a phoenix, she was also female. But suddenly, wings appeared on Zifeng's back, spreading out wide. Terrifying, flaming aura of the great path emanated from the dazzling divine feathers. Each feather seemed to contain frightening amounts of power. A formless might immediately enveloped Yi Futian's body. Zifeng said, You have now proven your way and reached the middle-level Renhuang Plain. You should have improved greatly after cultivating in seclusion for such a long time. Why don't we try out your abilities now? Zifeng did not allow Yi Futian any time to disagree. The divine fire of the great path immediately flared onto Yi Futian's body. Yi Futian sensed the oncoming current of the great path. He speculated that this phoenix had a huge grudge against him. All right, Yi Futian answered. His figure flashed, and he dashed into the sky, appearing high above the clouds in an instant. The phoenix similarly became a flaming red divine light that shot straight through the clouds. Her speed was incredible as she rocketed straight up. In the palace below, many people stepped outside. What was going on? Condor-sama stared wide-eyed at the intense waves of the great path in the sky. As expected of this overbearing phoenix, it was incredible for her to dare to provoke Master into battle. Condor-sama was trembling. High above the clouds, the two of them only stopped when they reached an extremely high point in the sky. They needed to maintain a high enough altitude for the shockwaves of their battle not to reach Eastern Deity Island. Even so, Will still swept up towards them one after another. The people below seemed very concerned about the situation up here. Yet, no one came to stop them. But scorching gales howled. A gigantic shadow of a phoenix appeared around Zifeng's figure. The giant phoenix spread its wings and flapped them downwards, causing an extremely hot gale of flames to sweep up in the sky above. It seemed capable of burning everything in its path. The light of the great path circled Yi Futian. He quietly stood there, facing Zifeng. As expected of the aura of the flawless level divine fire of the great path. Even with Yi Futian's current cultivation, he still felt a threatening aura coming from the flames. Countless flaming feathers of the phoenix danced and coalesced into one in the sky. Gradually, a true gigantic phoenix appeared. It covered the sky and blocked out the sun. It immediately covered this part of the sky. It was a majestic sight to behold. Yi Futian could naturally tell that Zifeng was serious this time. She wanted to see the level his ability was at now. She was different from other cultivators. Her great path was also flawless. She was naturally much more powerful than ordinary cultivators. Yi Futian and her were birds of a feather. Aside from wanting to vent her dissatisfaction with Yi Futian for cultivating in seclusion, she also wanted to know the level of Yi Futian's current true ability. Yi Futian understood what Zifeng was thinking. It appeared that to convince this proud phoenix, he would actually need to show some of his skills. His will shifted. In an instant, the sun and moon circled around him, and heavenly signs appeared. Above him, an extremely resplendent divine pattern of the great path appeared. The power of yin and yang flowed around him, and the sun and moon appeared in the pattern. They frenziedly consumed the aura of the great path in the vast space. This pattern expanded rapidly. It became a gigantic pattern that covered the sky in a short amount of time, directly shadowing the huge phoenix. The power of yin and yang descended and immediately enveloped the gigantic shadow of the phoenix. The phoenix let out a deafening screech. Her sharp claws immediately reached out to rip apart the huge yin-yang diagram in the sky. She was extremely overbearing. But the halo of yin and the halo of divine fire descended on the phoenix at the same time. The figure of the phoenix turned somewhat illusory as she was faced with extremely terrifying pressure. Countless divine swords flowed in the sacred yin-yang diagram. The next moment, the sword chi of Sun Sword and Shadow Sword slaughtered their way over. The phoenix once again let out a long screech. She lifted her claws to swipe the attacks away and block them. She wanted to use her fire to directly melt the sharp swords, but it was difficult for her flames to do so. In an instant, the gigantic phoenix seemed to be drowned in sword chi. Very soon, the humongous shadow of the phoenix disappeared. This caused the hearts of many Renhuangs on Eastern Deity Island who were observing the fight to tremble. Had Yi Futian's cultivation reached such a frightening stage? Zi Feng stared at Yi Futian with her beautiful eyes. She had a look of dissatisfaction on her face. "If you want a good spar, I will have all the time in the world to keep you company," Yi Futian said with a smile. "Follow me. I am going to meet the Island Lord." "Why are you going to meet the Island Lord?" Zi Feng asked. "To bid him farewell," Yi Futian replied. He had been cultivating on Eastern Deity Island for a couple of years. Now that he had broken through to the next plane, he should bid farewell and leave. Were they leaving? Zi Feng thought to herself. A couple of years ago, she had prepared herself to follow Yi Futian and leave Eastern Deity Island. However, they had cultivated on the island for a few years after that. This day had finally come. Yi Futian was prepared to venture out into the Divine Prefecture. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Yi Futian took Zi Feng to the place where the Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island resided. Upon seeing the two, the female Island Lord said calmly, "Are you ready to leave?" Yi Futian took Zi Feng to the place where the Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island resided. Upon seeing the two, the female Island Lord said calmly, "Are you ready to leave?" Clearly, she had already guessed that Yi Futian was leaving. After the turmoil regarding the Jun family had been resolved, Yi Futian was basically in a state of retreat. Besides cultivation, he was concentrating on alchemy. Now that his cultivation had greatly improved, his temperament had also been transformed. The only reason he was here to see her. It could only be that he was preparing to leave. "Yes, and we have come to say goodbye," Yi Futian nodded. "Very good." The Island Lord nodded readily, not asking him to stay. She continued, "How about having Baimu take some people and escort you?" Yi Futian was not sure of the other's true intention. He had enjoyed many benefits on Eastern Deity Island. It would not be realistic for him to cut off all contact with Eastern Deity Island after leaving. It would be too ungrateful, and the Island Lord would probably hunt him down. He swallowed the elixir, the divine tree was integrated into his body, and the divine flame was absorbed by him as well. He had inherited the alchemy art of the supreme deity Donglai, and enjoyed an unknown number of treasures in heaven and earth. Now he was about to kidnap a true phoenix from Eastern Deity Island. Don't overthink it, it's just to ensure your safety. It would be a small group because it doesn't make sense to have more. "I will pick the most outstanding ones," said the Island Lord. "With my current strength, the protection of the people from Eastern Deity Island won't be necessary." Yi Futian said, "Even if there are elders who are more powerful than me, it would not be by much. Moreover, I will not be staying put. If something comes up that cannot be solved, with the elders of Eastern Deity Island along, it will only complicate things." The Island Lord looked at Yi Futian and said, "You mean, you want to leave by yourself?" Yi Futian looked at the other in the eyes. Clearly, she was still worried about him, but it was not unexpected. Who wouldn't? There are no outsiders here. I have already appointed you internally as the second Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island. If you surpass me in the future, you could inherit the position as the Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island. Everything here that is mine can be considered to be yours as well," said the female island lord. Mine. Yi Futian blinked. Was he now the second island lord? This woman was no joke. She was willing to give him the entire Eastern Deity Island. Did this mean that all the goddesses of Eastern Deity Island were also his? As his thoughts turned to this, he immediately stopped himself. He viewed himself as a righteous gentleman. The female island lord nodded. It's all yours. If you can get to that day, even I have to obey your orders. Yi Futian looked at the stunningly beautiful and noble face in front of him, and his thoughts drifted to the unspeakable. Ahem. Yi Futian looked at the island lord and said, I hardly deserve such honor. You have swallowed the elixir and the divine tree. You inherited everything from my ancestors. You are now the heir of Eastern Deity Island, and there is nothing wrong with passing the island to you one day, the island lord of Eastern Deity Island continued. Yi Futian's eyes flickered. Since the other had said so, then there was no need for him to remain coy. He looked at the female island lord and said, however, this has nothing to do with whether the people of Eastern Deity Island would follow me. Their following means little unless what? The female island lord asked. Yi Futian looked at her, seemed to want to say something more but stopped himself. If accompanied by someone who was a top Renhuang, it would be much safer. Unless they get tangled up with some mighty figures, there would be little trouble. If you have anything to say, say it, the female island lord said coldly. What was this guy thinking? Those roving eyes were making her very displeased. How about the island lord also go with me for a bit of air? Yi Futian said weakly. Although he was already of the Middle Renhuang realm, his tone seemed to suggest a little lack of confidence. After all, this was a powerful existence that had slain cultivators in the Ninth Realm, such as Jun Xiaoyao. Although she was gorgeous, he was not deceived by her appearance. In the battle a few years ago, she had the most number of Renhuang kills. As Yi Futian's voice fell, an invisible pressure of the great path suddenly fell on him, making him shaking like a leaf. Next to him, Zifeng watched dumbfounded at Yi Futian. Was he really asking the island lord to follow him? This B*** was too bold. Yi Futian looked at the beautiful island lord weakly. Since she had already said that Eastern Deity Island would be his sooner or later, he was only exercising his power in advance. He could feel the coercion. The pressure was great. The female island lord had been staring at Yi Futian. She stepped forward, her long skirt moved upon the ground, noble and cold, with unparalleled grace. She now walked next to Yi Futian. If the island lord disagrees, then ignore what I just said. Yi Futian's attitude weakened considerably. The island lord stared at him and said, very well. Yi Futian blinked and looked up at the stunning face in front of him. She agreed? He didn't ask forcibly, and the other party actually agreed. The island lord's strength was extraordinary, and with her by his side, Renhuang realm opponents wouldn't be a concern anymore. I'm with you. The beauty that was the island lord said while she stared at Yi Futian. Suddenly, a small smile appeared, one that could turn all living creature upside down. However, Yi Futian had no time to appreciate such beauty. On the contrary, he felt a tightness all over. Would there be any conspiracy? When do we leave? The island lord asked. I'm going to refine some medicine, so how about after 7 days? Yi Futian raised his head and said in a low voice. His voice had lost much of its forcefulness. Good, I will work out the route of the trial so that you can do your own thing with peace of mind, said the island lord. Looking at her, Yi Futian felt that he was being led into a trap. The sense of conspiracy was getting stronger. Did he get this wrong? You came from the original realm, unfamiliar with divine prefecture, and I know Donghua domain better than you. Don't worry. I'm just leading the way. After all, this time, I'm just your follower, Island Lord Yi. She continued, emphasizing the last 3 words. The Island Lord is too courteous. It is settled. Yi Futian left quickly, still trembling. He fled without caring much for Zifeng, who was left behind. Watching Yi Futian's departure, Zifeng was a little speechless. She looked at the island lord and said, Sister, are you really going? Why not? The island lord looked at Yi Futian's departing figure with an intriguing smile. This little guy was truly daring, asking her to follow him. She gave him just a little taste, and he wanted to swallow the entire Eastern Deity Island up right this moment. Now, he even had some strange ideas about her. In this instance, on account that she hadn't been out for quite a long time, she would go with this little guy for a walk in the outside world. For the next 7 days, Yi Futian had been spending all his time in the alchemy laboratory, completely immersed in it. And this time, there was no one observing. Everyone was waiting outside, and Yi Futian didn't let anyone disturb his work. In the direction of the alchemy laboratory, wisps of terrifying aura permeated. A greenish divine splendor soared, turning into a divine tree, faintly covering this entire space. Inside, a medicinal fragrance flowed continuously from it. At this time, a terrifying flame of the way rushed into the sky, with a faint sound of the phoenix. When all the armorer looked over there, they saw a phantom of the phoenix appearing, circling outside. A loud cry of the phoenix was heard, and a beating sound came from inside the alchemy laboratory. The divine phoenix swayed upward and cried 9 times, piercing into the sky, like an unusual vision of heaven and earth, with incredible radiance. Rays of divine light soared into the sky, and a vibrant fragrance permeated the air. The great path's divine brilliance illuminated the laboratory, and everyone fixated on the vision in front of them. Alchemy, and an unusual phenomenon. "This is," someone murmured. "He should be," someone next to him responded, and they were all shocked. They finally realized why Yi Futian's attainments in alchemy were so strong, and his progress was so rapid. No wonder the Island Lord favored him and allowed him to do whatever he wanted. So, he was the heir of Supreme Deity Donglai. This was the alchemy of the Supreme Being Donglai, and Yi Futian had inherited his art of alchemy. All the medicines were left in the cauldron. All you elders may distribute them amongst yourselves. I'm going to have to take my leave now. A voice was heard, and all the crowd saw was a figure in white on its way out, already gone. Only then did everyone came to their senses and rushed into the alchemy laboratory. A medicinal smell greeted them, strong and fragrant. Inside the alchemy cauldron, the divine light of the great path was flowing about. But a shadow rushed in. In the next moment, several shadows came out at the same time, all rushing toward the alchemy cauldron. Soon, there were bursts of booming sounds that came out of the alchemy laboratory. Yi Futian moved in the void, as many voices kept coming from behind him. Voices were heard, followed by a loud bang. It was the sound of the alchemy laboratory exploding. Yi Futian sighed. It was not that he didn't want to help them, but rather that he couldn't bear for them to turn on one another. On this day, many alchemists fought each other violently. Friends fighting friends. They had no regard for their own dignity, while some had even gone to war directly. There was a panic on Eastern Deity Island as it was turned upside down. When someone reported to the Island Lord, they discovered that the Island Lord had already left Eastern Deity Island with Yi Futian and the others. Outside of Eastern Deity Island, a group of people walked in the void and mist. Baigong Ao stole a glance at the woman next to him from time to time, still in disbelief. His eyes, when they looked at Yi Futian, were full of worship and admiration. This guy was a real genius to have actually kidnapped the Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island. "Did you do that deliberately?" The Island Lord of Eastern Deity Island questioned Yi Futian. "Huh." Yi Futian pretended to be confused. "Alchemy laboratory," the Island Lord prompted. A complete misunderstanding. "I just wanted to keep some medicine," Yi Futian replied, much aggrieved. The Island Lord glanced at him but said nothing further. The group continued moving forward, preparing to leave the Penglai continent. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.